Jasmine Washington's fingers trembled as she pressed send on the company-wide email. Outside her window, the Atlantic Airlines jet remained grounded, flight attendants clustering in confusion. Smiling grimly, she watched as security escorted the entire flight crew off the tarmac. The revolution had begun with a boarding pass. Before we dive into this incredible story of power, prejudice, and justice, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like button if you've ever witnessed discrimination in action, and subscribe to never miss stories about people fighting back against injustice. Now, let's rewind to see how a simple flight turned into a national movement. The morning had started like any other for Jasmine Washington. At 40 years old, the self-made tech mogul and CEO of Phoenix Innovations had grown accustomed to early flights and packed schedules. Her penthouse apartment in downtown Atlanta offered a breathtaking view of the sunrise as she packed her designer luggage for yet another critical business trip. This one, however, could change everything. Jasmine checked her appearance in the mirror one final time. Her natural hair was styled in an elegant updo, her tailored navy suit impeccable, her posture perfect. She had learned long ago that in her position, appearance wasn't just personal, it was armor. "Everything ready for San Francisco, Ms. Washington?" her assistant Talia asked, handing her a tablet with the day's itinerary. "As ready as 8 months of preparation can make us," Jasmine replied, scanning the schedule. The merger talks with West Tech Solutions could potentially value Phoenix Innovations at $3 billion, a far cry from the small cybersecurity startup she had launched from her kitchen table 12 years ago. Growing up in Southside Chicago, Jasmine had faced obstacles that would have crushed someone with less determination. Her single mother had worked 3 jobs to keep them afloat, and Jasmine had fought her way through an underfunded public school system, earning a scholarship to MIT against overwhelming odds. Even there, as one of only a handful of black women in computer science, she'd faced constant questions about whether she truly belonged. Those experiences had forged her into steel. When investors dismissed her AI security software as interesting but not marketable, she had bootstrapped the company herself, working 18-hour days until the breakthrough government contract that had put Phoenix Innovations on the map. Now her security systems protected everything from airports to nuclear facilities, and her face had graced the cover of Forbes. Yet all that success couldn't shield her from days like today. The driver navigated through Atlanta's morning traffic as Jasmine reviewed her presentation one last time. The merger would not only secure her company's future but would fund her newest passion project, a tech education center in her old neighborhood, offering opportunities to kids who reminded her of herself. Atlanta International Airport buzzed with the usual morning activity as Jasmine strode toward the first-class lounge, her heels clicking purposefully on the polished floor. The lounge attendant at the entrance glanced up, his welcoming smile faltering slightly as he took in her appearance. "Membership card, please?" he asked, despite the fact that Jasmine had already placed her executive platinum card on the counter. "It's right in front of you," she replied evenly, maintaining her composure. This wasn't the first time, nor would it be the last. "Oh, of course, Ms." He glanced down, eyes widening slightly as he registered her name. "Ms. Washington. Welcome back." Inside the lounge, the pattern continued. A server approached white executives immediately while Jasmine waited. When she asked for a coffee, the woman repeated her order as if confirming she had heard correctly. "You want an espresso? Not a regular coffee?" Jasmine sipped her espresso, which was exactly what she had ordered, and observed the room. Several other business travelers typed on laptops or chatted quietly on phones. A white man in a suit similar to hers entered, and Jasmine noted the subtle differences in how he was treated, the immediate deference, the lack of scrutiny, the assumption of belonging. After years at the top, these microaggressions still registered, but Jasmine had learned to categorize them as background noise, irritating but not worth the energy of confrontation. She had bigger battles to fight. "Flight 1867 to San Francisco is now boarding at Gate A12, announced the overhead speaker. Jasmine gathered her belongings and headed toward the gate, mentally reviewing her opening strategy for the merger talks. At the gate, the boarding process was already underway. First class and priority passengers were lining up, and Jasmine took her place among them. When she reached the gate agent, a young woman with a tight ponytail, she received the now familiar extra scrutiny. First class? The agent asked, inspecting her boarding pass more carefully than she had the passengers before her. Yes, Jasmine replied simply, maintaining eye contact. The agent seemed to hesitate before scanning the pass. Have a good flight, Ms. Washington. As Jasmine walked down the jetway, she noticed a flight attendant at the aircraft door watching her approach. Anthony Barnes, according to his name tag, gave her a quick once-over before checking his manifest. Welcome aboard, he said, his tone professional but lacking the warmth he'd shown to the passenger ahead of her. Jasmine nodded and entered the plane, already calculating how many hours of work she could complete during the 5-hour flight. She hadn't built a billion-dollar company by letting these small indignities distract her from her goals. As she settled into her seat, Jasmine reflected on a conversation she'd had with her mother years ago. Success won't protect you, her mother had warned. It'll just change the nature of the battles. How right she had been. The prejudice hadn't disappeared with her success, it had simply become more subtle, wrapped in professional language and hidden behind policy. Little did she know that today, one of those battles would finally reach a breaking point. Jasmine made her way down the aisle of the Boeing 787, heading for seat 4A in the first-class cabin. The spacious area featured 12 pod-like seats arranged in a staggered pattern, each with direct aisle access. The cream-colored leather seats contrasted with dark wood accents, and mood lighting cast a soft blue glow throughout the cabin. Most of the first-class passengers had already boarded, predominantly white men in business attire, tapping away on laptops or settling in with noise-canceling headphones. A few glanced up as Jasmine passed, some with the brief flicker of surprise she had grown accustomed to seeing. Reaching seat 4A, Jasmine stowed her designer briefcase in the overhead compartment and placed her handbag in the side storage area of her seat. The window position offered both privacy and a view, her preferred combination for long flights. She was just sitting down when a voice interrupted her routine. Excuse me. Jasmine looked up to see a flight attendant standing in the aisle. Stacy Miller, according to her name tag, was a blonde woman in her mid-30s with a practiced smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Can I help you? Jasmine asked. I just need to verify you're in the correct seat, Stacy said, her voice carrying just enough to draw attention from nearby passengers. May I see your boarding pass again? Jasmine raised an eyebrow but reached for her handbag, extracting the boarding pass she had just used to board the plane minutes earlier. She handed it to Stacy without comment, aware that the cabin had grown quieter as passengers tuned in to the interaction. Stacy examined the boarding pass with exaggerated care. And this is your current boarding pass? Not from a previous flight. Heat rose to Jasmine's cheeks, but her expression remained neutral. 15 years in corporate America had perfected her poker face. Yes, it's for this flight. Flight 1867 to San Francisco, seat 4A. The same one I used to board the aircraft moments ago. From across the aisle in seat 4B, a white man in his 50s, salt and pepper hair, expensive watch, tailored suit, watched the exchange with undisguised interest. He caught Jasmine's eye and gave her a look that seemed to ask, is there a problem here? I'm Tyler Jennings, he introduced himself with a confident smile. Continental Investments. You heading to the tech conference? Before Jasmine could respond, Stacy interrupted. Sir, I'll be with you in just a moment to offer you a pre-departure beverage. Turning back to Jasmine, she continued, our manifest shows some seating changes were made. I just want to make sure you weren't accidentally upgraded in error. There was no error, Jasmine stated firmly. I booked this seat directly through my corporate travel department 3 weeks ago. By now, Anthony Barnes, the flight attendant who had greeted her at the door, had joined Stacy in the aisle. He leaned in, speaking in a stage whisper that carried perfectly to the surrounding seats. Is there an issue with the passenger, Stacy? I'm just confirming her seat assignment, Stacy replied, still holding Jasmine's boarding pass. The system has been glitchy lately with upgrades. Jasmine took a slow, measured breath. There seems to be some confusion. I am Jasmine Washington, CEO of Phoenix Innovations. I booked and paid for this first-class seat, as I do every week for business travel. Perhaps you could check your passenger manifest again. Anthony gave her a condescending smile. Ma'am, no one is questioning who you are. We just need to make sure everyone is in their assigned seats for weight and balance calculations. Jasmine noted that no other passengers in the first-class cabin had been subjected to this level of scrutiny. The man across the aisle, Tyler, was already being served his requested bourbon, no ID or verification required. Of course, Jasmine replied, her tone cooling several degrees. While you're at it, perhaps you could verify every passenger's identity and seat assignment with the same thoroughness. Anthony's smile tightened. That won't be necessary. May I see your ID as well as your boarding pass? Jasmine reached for her wallet and extracted her driver's license along with her executive platinum frequent flyer card, which she handed over silently. By now, most of the first-class cabin was watching the interaction, some passengers exchanging glances or whispering to each other. Stacy and Anthony conferred in hushed tones, examining her credentials as if they were suspicious documents. Jasmine remained seated, her posture perfect, her expression impassive, though internally her blood was boiling. This performance wasn't for her benefit, it was a public display meant to communicate that she didn't belong, regardless of what her boarding pass said. After what seemed like an eternity but was probably only 30 seconds, Stacy approached a phone near the galley and made a call. Moments later, the cockpit door opened, and the captain emerged. Captain Gregory Phillips was tall, with graying temples and the confident bearing of someone used to being the ultimate authority. He approached Jasmine's seat, where Stacy and Anthony stood waiting. What seems to be the problem? He asked, his voice carrying the practiced calm of someone who had handled countless in-flight situations. We're having some confusion about the seating assignment, Stacy explained, handing him Jasmine's documents. The passenger insists she's assigned to 4A. I don't insist, Jasmine corrected, her voice level but firm. My boarding pass, which was issued by your airline and scanned at your gate, confirms it. The captain reviewed her documents, then checked something on a tablet handed to him by Anthony. The entire first-class cabin was now watching the spectacle, and Jasmine felt the weight of every stare. This was no longer about a seat assignment, it was about public humiliation. Ms. Washington, the captain began, his tone reasonable but patronizing, it appears there may have been a system error. We show seat 4A as possibly being assigned to another passenger who hasn't boarded yet. That's impossible, Jasmine replied. I checked in online yesterday and selected this specific seat. These things happen, the captain said with a shrug. To avoid delaying the flight, perhaps you could take a seat in our Economy Plus section just for now. We can sort this out once we're airborne. Tyler Jennings, who had been watching the entire exchange, finally spoke up. Is this really necessary? The flight's nearly full. If there was a duplicate assignment, wouldn't your system have caught it at check-in? The captain gave him a tight smile. Sir, we're handling the situation. Thank you for your concern. Jasmine looked around the cabin, at the mixture of discomfort, curiosity, and in some cases, barely disguised satisfaction on the faces of her fellow passengers. In that moment, something shifted inside her. Years of swallowing indignities, of being the bigger person, of not making waves to preserve her professional image, all of it crystallized into a single, clarifying thought, no more. With deliberate movements, Jasmine reached for her handbag and extracted her phone. The crew watched warily as she unlocked it and dialed a number. What are you doing? Stacy asked, alarm creeping into her voice. Making a call, Jasmine replied calmly. I recommend you all prepare for some turbulence. Camila, Jasmine spoke into her phone, her voice steady despite the anger coursing through her. Execute Protocol Icarus immediately. Yes, Atlantic Airlines, Flight 1867, Atlanta to San Francisco. Full documentation. The three crew members exchanged confused glances as Jasmine ended the call and slipped her phone back into her handbag. She stood, her full height commanding the space around her. Ms. Washington, cell phone use is not permitted at this time, Captain Phillips began, but Jasmine cut him off with a raised hand. I understand completely, Captain. That's why I'll be deplaning now. She gathered her briefcase from the overhead bin with fluid grace. I suggest you all prepare for what comes next. Without another word, Jasmine walked past the bewildered crew members and made her way to the aircraft door, her heels clicking a decisive rhythm on the floor. Behind her, she could hear the confused murmurs of passengers and Stacy's urgent whisper to the captain. Should we stop her? Let her go, the captain replied. We'll depart as soon as the door is secured. If only they knew. 6 months earlier, Phoenix Innovations had quietly acquired a 17% stake in Atlantic Airlines as part of a broader investment strategy. While not enough for outright control, it made Jasmine the single largest individual shareholder in the company. The airline's board had welcomed her investment with public enthusiasm while privately wondering what a tech security company wanted with an airline. Today, they would find out. As Jasmine emerged from the jetway back into the terminal, she immediately dialed another number on her phone. This time, the call went directly to Harold Blackwood, CEO of Atlantic Airlines. Harold, she said when he answered. Jasmine Washington here. We have a situation that requires your immediate attention. Jasmine? What's going on? Harold's voice carried the wariness of an executive receiving an unexpected call from a major shareholder. I've just been removed from my first-class seat on Flight 1867 by your crew, who apparently couldn't believe a black woman belonged there despite my valid boarding pass, ID, and executive platinum status. Jasmine kept her voice measured, each word precise. Your captain suggested I sit in economy, just for now, rather than delay the flight by sorting out their mistake. There was a brief silence on the line, then, Jasmine, I'm not sure I understand. Are you saying our crew discriminated against you? I'm not saying it, Harold. I lived it. And in about 30 minutes, when the video from my assistant's phone goes viral, everyone else will see it too. This was a bluff, Camila wasn't on the flight, but Harold didn't need to know that. Unless you want Atlantic Airlines discriminates against black CEO, as tomorrow's headline, I suggest you take immediate action. Harold's voice dropped to an urgent whisper. What do you want me to do? I want that entire flight crew removed and suspended pending investigation. I want a formal apology from the airline. And I want a company-wide review of your diversity and inclusion training, with results reported directly to the board. Of which, need I remind you, I am now effectively a member. Jasmine's terms were non-negotiable, her tone leaving no room for compromise. Jasmine, removing an entire crew will delay the flight by hours. There are protocols, you have 20 minutes, Harold. After that, I call a press conference right here in the terminal. She ended the call without waiting for his response. Within 5 minutes, Jasmine's phone rang with a call from Atlantic's general counsel, who she referred back to Harold. 3 minutes after that, the airline's head of operations called to inform her that appropriate actions were being taken. Jasmine stood at the large windows overlooking the tarmac, watching as her plan unfolded. She sent a quick text to her team in San Francisco, informing them of a potential delay and instructing them to reschedule the afternoon meetings if necessary. This was more important. From her vantage point, she could see activity around the aircraft. The jetway, which had been disconnected in preparation for departure, was being reconnected to the plane. Inside the terminal, airline staff were suddenly moving with urgent purpose. Her phone buzzed with an incoming text from her assistant, social media monitoring activated. Keywords in place. Legal team on standby. Jasmine allowed herself a small smile. Phoenix Innovations hadn't become an industry leader by accident. Contingency planning was in their DNA, and Operation Icarus, named for flying too close to the sun, was a protocol developed specifically for situations where Jasmine or other executives faced discrimination. It included everything from legal responses to media management to shareholder communications. She had hoped never to use it. Today, she was glad it existed. The terminal gate area had begun to buzz with activity. Airline staff rushed toward Gate A12, and an announcement came over the PA system: Atlantic Airlines Flight 1867 to San Francisco is currently delayed due to operational issues. We apologize for any inconvenience and will provide updates as available. A security team appeared, heading toward the jetway with purpose. Behind them walked a woman in an Atlantic Airlines executive uniform, her face set in a grim expression that Jasmine recognized all too well: the face of crisis management. Passengers began to emerge from the jetway, confusion evident in their expressions. Some immediately pulled out phones, sensing drama worth documenting. Tyler Jennings appeared, spotted Jasmine standing by the window, and made his way toward her. "What the hell is happening?" he asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. "They just announced the flight is delayed for crew reassignment and asked everyone to deplane." "Justice is happening, Mr. Jennings," Jasmine replied, her eyes still fixed on the aircraft. "Sometimes it's delayed, but it always arrives eventually." As they watched, Captain Phillips and the flight attendants appeared in the jetway, escorted by security personnel. Their expressions ranged from confusion to anger as they were led away from the gate and down a service corridor. Did you just get the entire crew fired?" Tyler asked, his eyes widening in realization. "Suspended pending investigation," Jasmine corrected. "And I didn't do it. They did it to themselves when they decided to humiliate me instead of treating me with the same respect they showed every other first-class passenger." The airline executive who had entered the jetway now emerged and scanned the gate area until her eyes landed on Jasmine. With determined steps, she approached, hand extended. "Ms. Washington. I'm Regina Taylor, Vice President of Operations for Atlantic Airlines. On behalf of the entire company, I want to personally apologize for your experience today." Jasmine took her hand firmly. "I appreciate that, Ms. Taylor. But I'm more interested in actions than apologies at this point." Regina nodded, understanding perfectly. "The crew has been removed and placed on administrative leave. We're bringing in a replacement crew from our standby roster, which should arrive within the hour. We'd like to offer you a full refund of your ticket, complimentary upgrades for your next 5 flights, and our assurance that this incident will be thoroughly investigated. And the company-wide review of your diversity and inclusion practices." Jasmine pressed. Regina's surprise was evident but quickly masked. "I haven't been briefed on that yet, but I'm sure our CEO will be in touch directly about broader measures." "He will," Jasmine confirmed. "Because this isn't about one crew or one flight, Ms. Taylor. This is about a culture that allowed them to think their behavior was acceptable." As Regina excused herself to coordinate the logistics of the crew change, Tyler Jennings remained at Jasmine's side, reassessing her with new eyes. "You must have some serious pull to make all this happen," he observed. Jasmine finally turned to face him fully. "I have exactly as much pull as I've earned, Mr. Jennings. The question isn't why I can do this, it's why I should ever have to. Attention passengers of Atlantic Airlines Flight 1867 to San Francisco. We apologize for the delay. Due to unforeseen operational issues, we are currently awaiting a replacement flight crew. We expect to resume boarding in approximately 45 minutes. Thank you for your patience." The announcement triggered a wave of groans and complaints throughout the gate area. Passengers pulled out phones to reschedule meetings or inform waiting parties of their delayed arrival. Some approached the gate agents, demanding explanations or compensation. From her position near the window, Jasmine observed it all with a mixture of satisfaction and weariness. This wasn't how she had planned to spend her morning, but some battles couldn't be postponed. Regina Taylor returned, now accompanied by two men in suits who were introduced as the airline's Director of Customer Experience and their Regional Security Coordinator. Together, they escorted Jasmine to the private Atlantic Airlines lounge to await the new crew's arrival. Ms. Washington, Regina began once they were seated in a quiet corner of the exclusive lounge, "I want to assure you that what happened today is not representative of Atlantic Airlines' values. We're taking this matter extremely seriously." "I'm glad to hear that," Jasmine replied, accepting the sparkling water offered by a lounge attendant. "But I have to wonder how many other passengers have faced similar treatment without the resources to fight back." Regina's discomfort was evident. "We strive to treat all our passengers with respect." "And yet," Jasmine interrupted gently, "your crew singled me out for verification while accepting every white passenger's presence without question. That suggests a systemic issue, not an isolated incident." The Customer Experience Director, David Johnson, leaned forward. "Ms. Washington, in my 15 years with Atlantic, we've maintained one of the industry's strongest commitments to diversity and inclusion." Jasmine raised an eyebrow. "Really? And what percentage of your executive team is black, Mr. Johnson?" The uncomfortable silence that followed was answer enough. 2%, Jasmine supplied. "I checked before investing in your company 6 months ago. 2% in an industry where black travelers make up 12% of your domestic passengers. That's not commitment, that's tokenism." As the executives exchanged uneasy glances, Jasmine's phone buzzed with incoming notifications. The incident was beginning to leak onto social media. A passenger had tweeted, "Just witnessed a black woman forced off flight 1867 by crew, now entire crew being escorted out by security. What's happening at Atlantic Air?" Hashtag first class while black, the hashtag was already gaining traction. Jasmine showed the screen to Regina. "This is just the beginning. How you respond in the next few hours will define this story." Regina's face paled. "Our communications team is drafting a statement now. Make sure it acknowledges the specific nature of the incident," Jasmine advised. "Nothing infuriates people more than corporate doublespeak that dances around racism by calling it a misunderstanding or failure to meet our service standards." As they discussed next steps, Jasmine reflected on similar moments throughout her career. The venture capitalist who had asked if someone more technical could explain her own algorithm. The security guard who had stopped her entering her company's building despite her picture hanging in the lobby. The countless times she'd been mistaken for an assistant rather than the CEO. Each time, she had calculated the cost of fighting versus the cost of letting it go. Early in her career, she had swallowed these indignities, focusing on building her company instead of battling every slight. But with success had come power, and with power, responsibility. Not just to herself, but to everyone who would come after her. Her thoughts were interrupted by a commotion outside the lounge. Through the glass doors, she could see a local news crew setting up in the main terminal. Word was spreading faster than anticipated. "Ms. Washington," Regina said urgently, "would you be willing to issue a joint statement with us? Something that acknowledges the incident but also our commitment to addressing it?" Jasmine considered the request carefully. A joint statement would help the airline save face, but it might also dilute the message. Before she could respond, her phone rang, Harold Blackwood, the CEO, finally calling directly. "Jasmine, I've just been briefed on the situation," he began without preamble. "I want to personally assure you that the behavior you experienced today is completely unacceptable and does not reflect our values at Atlantic Airlines." "I appreciate that, Harold," Jasmine replied, maintaining a professional tone despite her simmering anger. "But I'm more interested in what happens next. The crew has been suspended pending a full investigation. We're arranging a replacement crew to get your flight on its way. And I'm calling an emergency meeting of our executive team to review our training protocols. That's a start, Jasmine acknowledged. But I want something more substantive. I want Atlantic to commission an independent audit of your customer service practices, with specific attention to how passengers of color are treated compared to white passengers. And I want the results presented to the board. There was a pause before Harold responded. That's an unusual request. So was being asked to give up my seat despite having a valid boarding pass, Jasmine countered. As a significant shareholder, I have both the right and the responsibility to ensure the company I've invested in is operating ethically. After another pause, Harold agreed. I'll have our general counsel draft the parameters for an audit. And Jasmine. I truly am sorry this happened. Don't be sorry, Harold. Be better. Jasmine ended the call and turned back to Regina and her colleagues. It seems we have an understanding. Now, when will the new crew be ready? Would you comment number 1 if you believe Jasmine was right to use her power as a shareholder to hold the airline accountable? Or comment number 2 if you think she overreacted to what some might call, just bad customer service? This moment marks a turning point in our story. Should Jasmine continue pushing for systemic change, or is the crew's suspension enough? Like and subscribe to follow what happens next in this powerful confrontation with corporate America's racial biases. But wait. How will the other passengers react when they discover the real reason for their delay? The new flight crew arrived within the hour, fresh-faced and visibly nervous after being briefed on the situation. The lead flight attendant, a black woman named Desiree Thomas, approached Jasmine in the lounge personally. Ms. Washington, I'm Desiree, your lead flight attendant for today's journey to San Francisco. I want to assure you that we'll do everything possible to make your flight comfortable. Jasmine smiled, recognizing the awkward position Desiree had been placed in. Thank you, Desiree. I appreciate that. And please know that my issue was never with Atlantic's frontline employees as a whole, but with specific behavior that needed to be addressed. As passengers began reboarding the aircraft, Jasmine could feel the shift in atmosphere. Word had spread throughout the gate area, whispers and glances following her as she walked down the jetway. Some passengers offered supportive nods or quiet words of encouragement. Others displayed barely concealed resentment at the 2-hour delay. All this for a seating mix-up, one man muttered as she passed. Some people just love making everything about race. Jasmine kept her eyes forward, refusing to engage. This reaction was as predictable as it was disappointing. Returning to seat 4A, Jasmine found the first-class cabin atmosphere noticeably tense. Tyler Jennings was already back in his seat across the aisle, studying her with newfound interest as she stored her briefcase. So, he said once she was seated, Phoenix Innovations. You're Jasmine Washington. I am, she confirmed, opening her laptop to signal her preference for working rather than chatting. Tyler wasn't deterred. I should have recognized you. That government security contract last year made quite a splash. Among other achievements, Jasmine replied coolly. Look, Tyler lowered his voice, leaning slightly toward her, I want to apologize for not speaking up more forcefully earlier. What happened was clearly inappropriate. Jasmine regarded him carefully, assessing his sincerity. Thank you. But this isn't about individual bystanders, Mr. Jennings. It's about systems that enable discrimination and the courage to dismantle them. Tyler, please, he insisted. And I understand systems better than most. Continental Investments specializes in transportation sector ventures. In fact, he hesitated, we've been looking at security integration opportunities that might align with Phoenix's expertise. Jasmine resisted the urge to roll her eyes. Of course, now that he knew who she was, she had transformed from an anomaly to a business opportunity. Before she could respond, her phone buzzed with an urgent news alert. The story had broken nationally. #FirstClassWhileBlack was trending, with over 20,000 mentions in the past hour. Multiple passengers had shared accounts of the incident, with varying degrees of accuracy. Atlantic Airlines stock had dropped 3% in afternoon trading. While most of the social media response supported Jasmine, a significant counternarrative was emerging. Conservative news pundit Zachary Morrison had tweeted, "CEO uses corporate power to fire working-class employees over perceived slight. This isn't fighting racism, it's abusing privilege." #Atlantic Airlines. His tweet had gained substantial traction, particularly among those framing the incident as an overreaction that cost ordinary workers their jobs. The narrative was shifting from discrimination to a powerful executive throwing her weight around. "Is everything all right?" Tyler asked, noticing her expression darken as she scrolled through her phone. "Just watching how quickly some people rush to defend discrimination," Jasmine replied, putting her phone away as the captain announced they were finally cleared for departure. The new captain, James Rodriguez, had made a point of personally welcoming Jasmine aboard and assuring her of a smooth flight. The entire replacement crew moved through the cabin with heightened professionalism, their interactions with Jasmine carefully calibrated to be courteous without appearing obsequious. As the plane finally lifted off from Atlanta, nearly 3 hours behind schedule, Jasmine gazed out the window at the receding cityscape. The confrontation had been necessary but exhausting, and she still had a crucial merger negotiation awaiting her in San Francisco. Her executive team had been sending updates throughout the delay. The social media response was mixed but predominantly supportive. Atlantic Airlines had issued a carefully worded statement acknowledging an incident involving a valued customer and promising a full investigation. Several civil rights organizations had already reached out, offering support and requesting interviews. None of this was what Jasmine had planned for today, but perhaps it was what needed to happen. She thought back to her childhood hero, her great-aunt Loretta, who had participated in lunch counter sit-ins during the civil rights movement. "Change never comes without cost," Aunt Loretta had told her. "The question is whether you're willing to pay it." Was Jasmine willing to pay the cost of becoming the face of this particular battle? The merger negotiations wouldn't be affected, her company's technology spoke for itself, but the personal scrutiny would be intense. Already, she could see passengers surreptitiously taking photos of her, undoubtedly sharing them on social media. Her phone buzzed again with a text from her chief counsel, "Morrison segment about you scheduled for tonight's broadcast. Want us to respond?" Jasmine considered her options. Engaging directly with Morrison would elevate his platform, but ignoring him would allow his narrative to go unchallenged. Before she could decide, another text came through, this one from an unexpected source, her mother. "Saw the news. So proud of you standing your ground. Your father would have been too." That simple message centered her. This wasn't about Jasmine Washington, CEO. It was about the principle that had guided her life, that dignity wasn't negotiable, regardless of who you were or what you looked like. She texted back to her team, no direct engagement with Morrison. Instead, prepare data on discrimination in air travel. We're shifting from defense to offense. During the flight, Jasmine reviewed a file her team had compiled months earlier when they were considering the Atlantic Airlines investment. It contained statistics on passenger complaints categorized by race, internal diversity metrics, and comparisons with other major carriers. The numbers told a clear story that individual anecdotes could not, a pattern of systemic bias that affected everything from upgrade approvals to response times for assistance requests. This was no longer about one incident or one flight crew. It was about using this moment to create lasting change. Midway through the flight, Tyler Jennings returned from a visit to the lavatory and paused by Jasmine's seat. "I owe you an apology," he said quietly. "I've been thinking about what happened at boarding, and I realized I've witnessed similar situations before and said nothing. I convinced myself it wasn't my place to interfere." Jasmine looked up from her laptop, surprised by his candor. "The truth is," Tyler continued, "I benefited from the system working exactly as designed, prioritizing my comfort and experience at the expense of others. And that makes me complicit, even when I'm not the one asking to see someone's boarding pass twice." "Awareness is the first step," Jasmine acknowledged. What matters is what you do with it. Tyler nodded thoughtfully. I'd like to learn more, if you're willing to share. Continental Investments has significant stakes in 3 airline groups, and frankly, I've never considered examining their customer service metrics through this lens. For the first time that day, Jasmine felt a genuine sense of possibility. Perhaps this incident, painful as it was, could create ripples beyond one airline or one flight. I'll have my team send you our research framework, she offered. The data might surprise you. As their conversation concluded and Jasmine returned to her work, she couldn't help but notice the flight attendants' changed behavior. Their nervousness had evolved into something more deliberate, a hyper-awareness of every interaction, especially with passengers of color. It wasn't genuine inclusion, merely the performance of it under scrutiny. Real change would require more than one incident and one day of headlines. It would require sustained pressure and structural reform. As the plane began its descent into San Francisco, Jasmine drafted an email to her executive team with a new directive: prepare to launch the Accountability Initiative immediately. The Accountability Initiative had been a back-burner project at Phoenix Innovations, a plan to leverage their data analytics capabilities to create transparency tools for evaluating corporate diversity and inclusion metrics. Today's events had just moved it to the top of the priority list. By the time the plane touched down in San Francisco, Jasmine had mapped out a strategy that would transform a personal humiliation into an industry-wide reckoning. This was no longer just about one CEO denied her rightful seat, it was about changing the system itself. Alexander Davis was waiting when Jasmine emerged from the secure area at San Francisco International Airport. Her chief strategy officer leaned against a pillar, his tall frame easily visible above the crowd. When he spotted her, he straightened and moved forward, concern evident in his expression. "Quite the morning you've had," he said by way of greeting. "The car's waiting outside. I figured you might want to avoid the main terminal given the circumstances." "Always thinking ahead, Alex. That's why I pay you the big bucks." Jasmine managed a tired smile as they walked briskly toward a private exit. "How bad is it?" "Mixed," Alexander replied, matching her pace. "Atlantic stock is down 4% now. They've issued 2 statements, the first was corporate boilerplate, the second more direct after social media roasted them. The crew is claiming they were following protocol for boarding irregularities. And you've got interview requests from everyone from CNN to The View." Jasmine nodded, processing the information. "And the merger talks? Still on for 3 o'clock. Westekka's CEO called personally to confirm. Said, and I quote, anyone who stands her ground like that is exactly the kind of partner we want. That, at least, was good news. They reached the black SUV waiting at the curb, and Jasmine slid into the back seat, grateful for the momentary privacy as Alexander took the seat beside her. We've got 90 minutes before we need to be at West Tech, he said. How do you want to use it? Jasmine pulled out her tablet. I want to draft a comprehensive strategy. This isn't just about today's incident anymore, Alex. It's about using this moment to create actual change. Alexander nodded, unsurprised. He had worked with Jasmine long enough to recognize when she had shifted into problem-solving mode. What are you thinking? 3 parallel tracks, Jasmine began, opening a new document. Legal, media, and corporate reform. For the next hour, as their driver navigated San Francisco's busy streets, Jasmine and Alexander mapped out what would become the Accountability Initiative. The legal track would involve a formal complaint with the Department of Transportation, using Phoenix's data analytics to demonstrate patterns of discriminatory treatment across the airline industry. The media track would shift the narrative from one incident to the broader issue of corporate accountability for bias. And the corporate reform track would leverage Jasmine's position as a significant shareholder to push for structural changes within Atlantic Airlines. We should reach out to other executives of color who faced similar situations, Jasmine said, typing rapidly. Create a coalition with actual teeth. I can think of at least 5 off the top of my head, Alexander replied. Remember when James Wilson from Geotech was detained by hotel security in his own lobby? Exactly. And Aisha Patel being questioned about her first-class ticket on European Airlines last year. These aren't isolated incidents, they're data points in a pattern. As they refined the strategy, Jasmine received a call from Regina Taylor at Atlantic Airlines. Ms. Washington, I wanted to update you personally. We've completed preliminary interviews with the flight crew, and, well, their accounts differ significantly from yours. I'm shocked, Jasmine replied, her voice dry. Captain Phillips is claiming he was simply following security protocols given a seating discrepancy in the system. He's also suggesting that your tone was aggressive from the start. Of course he is. The alternative would be admitting bias. Jasmine exchanged glances with Alexander, who was already taking notes. Ms. Taylor, I assume these interviews are being recorded? Yes, there's standard procedure for good. Then you'll have a record when we compare their accounts with the statements from other passengers and the documentation my team has already collected. This was another strategic exaggeration. Her team was still gathering passenger statements, but Regina didn't need to know that. There was a pause before Regina continued. Our CEO has authorized me to offer you a settlement package, including a formal apology and compensation for any distress caused. I'm not interested in a settlement, Jasmine stated firmly. I'm interested in systemic change. The independent audit we discussed earlier is non-negotiable. After concluding the call, Jasmine turned to Alexander. They're going to try to make this go away with money and a private apology. Standard crisis management, he agreed. Contain, compensate, and bury. Not this time. Jasmine's determination was palpable. I've spent too many years watching companies issue hollow apologies and performative diversity statements without actually changing their practices. By the time they arrived at West Teca's headquarters, Jasmine had outlined a comprehensive strategy that went far beyond Atlantic Airlines. This would be a campaign for transparency and accountability across the entire corporate landscape. The merger negotiations proceeded smoothly, with West Teca's executives clearly impressed by Jasmine's composure given the morning's events. By late afternoon, they had reached preliminary agreement on most key points, with final terms to be drafted over the next week. As they were concluding the meeting, West Teca's CEO, Linda Harrington, pulled Jasmine aside. I watched that Atlantic Airlines story develop all day, she said quietly. For what it's worth, the same thing happened to me 3 years ago on a different airline. I didn't have your courage, I just took the humiliation and moved on. It's not about courage, Jasmine replied. It's about being in a position where I can afford to fight back. Too many people don't have that luxury. Well, whatever you're planning next, West Tech has your back. This merger just got personal for me. By evening, Jasmine had checked into her hotel suite and transformed it into a command center. Her San Francisco-based team members cycled through with updates while she maintained video conferences with her Atlanta headquarters. The coalition she had envisioned was taking shape faster than expected. 6 prominent executives of color had already agreed to join forces, sharing their own experiences of discrimination in corporate settings and pledging resources to the Accountability Initiative. Meanwhile, Atlantic Airlines was facing growing pressure. Their stock had closed down 5%, and a group of employees had begun a petition calling for mandatory bias training across all customer-facing roles. The original flight crew remained suspended, with Captain Phillips giving an interview to a sympathetic conservative outlet claiming he was being scapegoated for following company policy. Tyler Jennings had reached out as well, providing contact information for Continental Investments' governance team and requesting a briefing on Phoenix's approach to evaluating diversity metrics. This could be bigger than we initially thought, Alexander observed as they reviewed the day's developments. We're hitting a nerve. Because everyone knows this isn't about one incident, Jasmine replied. It's about the 1,000 small humiliations people of color face every day in spaces where we're still seen as exceptions rather than the rule. As midnight approached, Jasmine finally sent her team to get some rest. Alone in her suite, she allowed herself a moment of reflection. The merger was on track, which had been her original priority for this trip. But somehow, that now seemed secondary to the movement she had inadvertently launched. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother, "Saw you on the news. Holding my head high knowing my daughter isn't settling for less than she deserves. Rest well, warrior." Jasmine smiled, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. Tomorrow would bring challenges, media scrutiny, corporate pushback, the inevitable backlash from those who believed she had overreacted. But tonight, she was certain of one thing. Sometimes the most important battles found you, not the other way around. Before sleeping, she sent one final email to her executive team: expand the accountability initiative scope. This isn't just about airlines anymore. It's about creating a new standard for how corporations handle bias at every level. And it starts now. 2 days later, in a sleek boardroom on the 48th floor of Atlantic Airlines corporate headquarters, 12 board members sat in uncomfortable silence as they absorbed the public relations disaster unfolding across their screens. CEO Harold Blackwood stood at the head of the table, his normally confident demeanor replaced by grim determination. "The numbers aren't good," he stated, nodding to the chief marketing officer to advance to the next slide. 72 hours of sustained negative press coverage. Bookings down 12%. Share price down 7% at market close yesterday. And the hashtag has now been used over 3 million times. Board member Franklin Pierce, a silver-haired veteran of the airline industry, shook his head. All this over one seating misunderstanding? It's completely disproportionate. It wasn't a seating misunderstanding, corrected Amara Johnson, one of only 2 black board members. According to multiple witness statements, it was a clear case of racial profiling by our crew. And Ms. Washington's subsequent treatment has resonated with millions of people who've experienced similar discrimination. The crew claims they were following protocol, Pierce countered. Are we really going to throw them under the bus to appease social media? Harold raised a hand to forestall the brewing argument. The issue isn't whether to support our employees. It's how to address a legitimate complaint about customer treatment while also managing the broader perception crisis. The boardroom door opened, and the general counsel entered with a tablet in hand. "I've just received word that Jasmine Washington has formally declined our settlement offer," she announced. Additionally, her company has filed a complaint with the Department of Transportation alleging systematic discrimination in our boarding and upgrade procedures. A collective groan spread around the table. "There's more," the lawyer continued. "She's formed what they're calling the Corporate Accountability Coalition, a group of prominent executives of color who are sharing their own experiences with discrimination in business settings. They're advocating for industry-wide reforms in how companies handle bias incidents. This has gone from a PR issue to an existential threat," Harold concluded. Ms. Washington isn't interested in compensation or personal apologies. She's using this incident as a catalyst for broader change. As the Atlantic Airlines board grappled with their response, Jasmine was conducting her own war room session in Phoenix Innovation's San Francisco office. Screens displayed social media analytics, press coverage, and the coalition's growing membership. "We've now documented 342 incidents of similar treatment across all major U.S. carriers in the past year alone," reported Phoenix's data analytics lead. "The pattern is undeniable when you look at the numbers." Jasmine nodded. "That's our strongest weapon, data that proves this isn't about one flight or one crew or one airline. It's systematic." Her phone buzzed with an incoming call from an unlisted number. She excused herself to take it in a private office. "Ms. Washington, this is Stacy Miller." Jasmine's eyebrows shot up in surprise. The flight attendant who had initiated the confrontation was the last person she expected to hear from. "I've been told not to contact you directly," Stacy continued, her voice tense. "But I want to tell my side of the story." "I'm listening," Jasmine replied neutrally. "We were following procedures. The system flagged your seat assignment as a possible duplicate, and were required to verify in those cases. Stacy's tone was defensive but also had an undercurrent of desperation. I've been with Atlantic for 11 years. I've never had a complaint. Now I'm being portrayed as a racist on national television, and my career is over. Ms. Miller, did the system flag any other passenger seats as duplicates on that flight? Jasmine asked calmly. I don't recall. Were any white passengers asked to show their boarding passes twice and suggest they move to economy? That's not fair. You're taking this completely out of context. Context is precisely what matters here, Jasmine replied. The context is that I was the only black woman in first class, and I was the only passenger whose right to be there was questioned. That pattern has been repeated countless times across the industry. So I'm just collateral damage in your crusade? Stacy's voice cracked with emotion. I have a mortgage. I have kids. The appeal to sympathy wasn't lost on Jasmine, but neither was the irony. Ms. Miller, I understand your concern for your future. I'm concerned about the future too, a future where people aren't humiliated based on how they look. If you truly believe you did nothing wrong, then participate honestly in the investigation. If there were system flags, there will be records. After ending the call, Jasmine rejoined her team, more convinced than ever of the importance of their mission. The personal attacks were escalating. Conservative commentator Zachary Morrison had dedicated a 15-minute segment to portraying her as an entitled elitist using racial grievance to punish working-class employees. But the coalition was growing faster than the backlash, with new allies joining hourly. By evening, Atlantic Airlines had issued a new statement announcing a comprehensive review of their customer service training and the appointment of an independent auditor to examine their practices. Exactly what Jasmine had demanded from the beginning. It should have felt like victory, but Jasmine knew better. Corporate America had perfected the art of appearing to change while maintaining the status quo. Real transformation would require sustained pressure and verification. That night, as she prepared for her return flight to Atlanta, Jasmine received an unexpected message from Tyler Jennings. Continental Investments is conducting an internal audit of all our transportation portfolio companies based on your framework. The preliminary findings are troubling. Can we talk? The coalition was working. By bringing together powerful voices and backing them with incontrovertible data, they were creating pressure that corporations couldn't simply weather and wait out. The next morning, as Jasmine checked out of her hotel, she spotted a familiar face in the lobby. Captain Gregory Phillips, still in his Atlantic Airlines uniform but without the commanding presence he had projected on the aircraft. Ms. Washington, he said, approaching hesitantly. May I speak with you? Jasmine signaled her security detail to give them space. Captain Phillips. I want you to know that I wasn't racially profiling you, he began, his tone somewhere between defensive and pleading. I was responding to a situation my flight attendants had already escalated. And did you question their judgment? Jasmine asked. Did you wonder why they singled out the only black woman in first class for extra scrutiny? That's not how I saw it in the moment, he admitted. I saw a passenger dispute that needed resolution to keep the flight on schedule. That's the problem, Captain Phillips. You didn't see it because you didn't have to. The system works so smoothly for people like you that its failures for others are invisible until someone forces you to look. The captain seemed genuinely unsettled by her words. They're saying we'll all be fired after the investigation. That my 30-year career will end in disgrace. What happens next depends on your willingness to acknowledge the reality of what occurred, Jasmine replied. This isn't about punishing individuals, it's about changing systems. But that change begins with honesty about the problem. As she walked away, Jasmine reflected on how differently this confrontation felt from their interaction on the plane. There, he had held all the power. Here, the dynamic had shifted, not because she wanted revenge, but because she had refused to accept injustice as the cost of doing business. By the time she boarded her flight back to Atlanta, news had broken that Atlantic Airlines was implementing immediate changes. Revised training protocols, a new customer feedback system specifically tracking potential bias incidents, and the creation of a chief diversity officer position reporting directly to the CEO. It wasn't everything, but it was a start. And with the coalition now targeting the entire industry rather than a single airline, the pressure would only increase. As the plane lifted off from San Francisco, Jasmine gazed out at the city below, thinking about how differently this trip had turned out from what she had planned. The merger was proceeding successfully, but she had also launched a movement that might ultimately prove more significant than any business deal. Her phone buzzed with a message from Alexander. Atlantic just announced Regina Taylor as their new chief diversity officer. Looks like they're serious. Jasmine smiled. The battle was far from over, but for the first time, she allowed herself to feel cautiously optimistic. Sometimes, transformation began with a single moment of refusal, the decision to say, no more, and mean it. 1 week after the incident, Jasmine stood at the podium in Phoenix Innovation's Atlanta headquarters, facing a room filled with journalists, corporate partners, and members of the rapidly expanding Corporate Accountability Coalition. The press conference had been called to announce the coalition's formal agenda, but it had taken on added significance following Atlantic Airlines' announcement of sweeping reforms the previous day. What began as a personal humiliation has evolved into something much more important, Jasmine stated, her voice steady and resolute. This coalition represents leaders from across industries who have experienced the same pattern of discrimination and are now using their positions to create lasting change. The coalition's agenda was ambitious: industry-wide standards for bias training, transparent reporting of discrimination complaints, and independent auditing of customer service interactions to identify patterns of differential treatment. Already, 23 major corporations had voluntarily agreed to participate, with Atlantic Airlines leading the way. True change isn't measured in press releases or promotional videos, Jasmine continued. It's measured in consistent, verifiable actions that transform corporate culture from the inside out. That's why we're establishing the Accountability Index, a public rating system that will track companies' progress on measurable metrics of inclusion and equal treatment. As questions poured in from reporters, Jasmine noticed a familiar face in the back of the room, Tyler Jennings, watching with undisguised admiration. He had become an unexpected ally, leveraging Continental Investment's significant holdings in transportation companies to push for adoption of the coalition standards. After the press conference, Tyler approached her. "That was impressive. You've accomplished more in a week than most diversity initiatives achieve in years." "Because we're not asking for performative gestures," Jasmine replied. "We're demanding structural change backed by data and transparency. Continental's board has approved our partnership with the coalition," Tyler informed her. "We're committing $20 million to fund the Accountability Index development and implementation across our portfolio companies." This was a significant victory. Financial backing from a major investment firm would give the coalition credibility in quarters that might otherwise dismiss their efforts as politically motivated. "Thank you," Jasmine said sincerely. "Your support means a lot, especially given how this all started." Tyler's expression grew more serious. "I've been thinking about that first-class cabin and how comfortable I was while you were being humiliated. The more I reflect on it, the more I realize how many times I've witnessed similar situations and said nothing. That makes me part of the problem. And now you're part of the solution," Jasmine offered. "That's how change happens, one person at a time recognizing their role in maintaining or dismantling unjust systems." As the headquarters emptied of press and visitors, Jasmine met with her executive team to review the merger's final details. The West Tech acquisition was proceeding smoothly, with closing documents to be signed the following week. What had begun as a routine business trip had transformed both her company's future and her own public profile. "The Social Impact Fund is ready to launch alongside the merger announcement," Alexander reported. $50 million dedicated to technology education in underserved communities, with the first center breaking ground in Southside Chicago next month. This had been Jasmine's dream long before the Atlantic Airlines incident, using Phoenix's success to create pathways for kids like she had been, with talent and determination but limited opportunities. Now, the heightened public attention would amplify the fund's impact. That evening, Jasmine received an unexpected request for a meeting from Regina Taylor, Atlantic Airlines' newly appointed Chief Diversity Officer. They agreed to meet at a quiet restaurant near Phoenix's headquarters. "I want to thank you," Regina said once they were seated. "Not just for forcing Atlantic to confront its issues, but for creating a blueprint for how to address them meaningfully. You're taking on a challenging role," Jasmine observed. "Corporate diversity positions often come with high expectations but limited authority." "Not this time," Regina smiled. "Your shareholder leverage ensured that. I report directly to the CEO, sit on the executive committee, and have veto power over policy changes affecting customer and employee experience. It's a real position with real teeth. Use them wisely," Jasmine advised. "The biggest challenge isn't implementing new policies but changing the underlying culture that made the old ones seem acceptable." As they discussed strategies for sustainable change, Jasmine's phone buzzed with a news alert. Captain Gregory Phillips had given an interview acknowledging his role in the incident and calling for industry-wide reflection on unconscious bias in air travel. "I failed to question why Ms. Washington was being treated differently," he stated in the interview. "After 30 years in aviation, I had stopped seeing the patterns of inequality that were right in front of me. That blindness cost me my career, but it's taught me a lesson I hope others will learn without the same price." Regina looked up from her own phone displaying the same alert. "He reached out to me yesterday, actually. Asked if there might be a role for him in our new training program, not to be reinstated as a pilot, but to share his experience as a cautionary tale." "What did you tell him?" Jasmine asked. "That redemption starts with accountability, and accountability starts with telling the truth, no matter how uncomfortable." 3 months after the incident, the transformation was evident across multiple fronts. Atlantic Airlines had implemented all of the coalition's recommended changes and was featuring its improved diversity metrics prominently in its advertising. The Accountability Index had published its first quarterly ratings, with companies scrambling to improve their scores before the next assessment. Phoenix Innovation's merger with WestTech had created the largest minority-owned technology company in the country, with Jasmine's enhanced public profile bringing increased attention to their security solutions and social impact initiatives. The first Chicago Technology Center was under construction, with 5 more planned in urban centers across the country. Most importantly, the coalition had grown to include over 100 executives from across industries, each leveraging their position to push for measurable change within their organizations. What had begun as one woman's stand against humiliation had evolved into a movement for corporate accountability that showed no signs of slowing down. As Jasmine prepared to board another flight, this time to Chicago for the Technology Center groundbreaking, she reflected on how much had changed. Atlantic Airlines had reached out in advance to ensure her experience would be flawless. The crew greeted her with genuine respect rather than the exaggerated deference that had characterized her return flight from San Francisco. More significantly, she noticed subtle changes in how other passengers of color were treated, the same courtesies extended, the same benefit of the doubt given, the same assumption of belonging that white passengers had always enjoyed. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't universal. True transformation would take years, not months. But it had begun, and Jasmine was determined to see it through, not just for herself, but for everyone who had ever swallowed their dignity because they lacked the power to demand better. As the plane lifted off, bound for Chicago and the future she had always envisioned, Jasmine smiled at the realization that sometimes, the most important journeys began with refusing to give up your seat. 3 months later, Jasmine settled into Seat 4A on Atlantic Airlines Flight 2103 from Atlanta to Chicago. The first-class cabin had the same layout, the same soft lighting, the same subtle luxury as that fateful flight to San Francisco. But everything else had changed. The lead flight attendant, Michael Torres, greeted her with genuine warmth rather than the rehearsed deference she had experienced immediately after the incident. Ms. Washington, welcome aboard. It's an honor to have you flying with us today. Thank you, Michael, she replied, noting his name tag. How long have you been with Atlantic? 8 years now, he smiled. And I have to say, the changes over the past 3 months have transformed the company culture. Your impact has been, well, revolutionary isn't too strong a word. Jasmine nodded appreciatively, recognizing that this wasn't performative flattery but genuine acknowledgement. As other passengers boarded, she observed the crew's interactions carefully. The consistency was what struck her most. Every passenger received the same respectful welcome, the same attention to needs, the same assumption of belonging, regardless of appearance. Her phone buzzed with a text from Regina Taylor, just got the quarterly numbers. Bias complaints down 78% company-wide. Employee satisfaction scores at a 5-year high. You started something remarkable here. Attached to the message was a photo from Atlantic's headquarters, where Regina stood beside a newly installed plaque in the training center, the Washington Standard, equal dignity, equal service, no exceptions. The company had named their reformed customer service protocol after Jasmine, a gesture she had initially resisted until Regina convinced her of its symbolic importance. Your name on that standard sends a message, Regina had argued. It reminds everyone that accountability comes from the top, and that one person with principle can change an entire industry. As the plane prepared for departure, Jasmine reflected on how thoroughly that prediction had been fulfilled. The Accountability Index had published its second quarterly ratings, now covering over 200 major corporations. Companies with poor scores were facing pressure from investors, customers, and their own employees to implement meaningful reforms. Phoenix Innovations had created a specialized division dedicated to developing metrics and assessment tools for corporate diversity initiatives, turning Jasmine's commitment to data-driven accountability into a profitable business line. The merger with West Tech had exceeded all financial projections, with their integrated security solutions now protecting critical infrastructure across 4 continents. But the achievement that gave Jasmine the most satisfaction was far more personal. She was en route to Chicago for the grand opening of the Phoenix Technology Center in her childhood neighborhood. The state-of-the-art facility would provide free coding classes, technology access, and mentorship to children from underserved communities, creating pathways to opportunity that had been painfully scarce in her own youth. The first cohort of 100 students had already been selected, with a waiting list that spoke volumes about the hunger for such opportunities. Each student would receive a full scholarship, technology equipment, and guaranteed internships at partner companies upon completion of the program. As the plane reached cruising altitude, Jasmine opened her laptop to review her speech for the opening ceremony. The journey from that moment of humiliation on Flight 1867 to today had been extraordinary, transforming not just her own trajectory but rippling outward to affect countless lives. Her phone buzzed again, this time with a news alert. Stacy Miller, the flight attendant whose actions had triggered the original confrontation, had given her first public interview since the incident. Rather than the defensive posturing Jasmine had expected, the article quoted Stacy acknowledging how her unconscious biases had influenced her behavior that day. I didn't think of myself as prejudiced, Stacy stated. But when I was forced to examine why I questioned Ms. Washington's presence in first class when I hadn't questioned any white passengers, I had to confront some uncomfortable truths about the assumptions I was making based on appearance. The article went on to reveal that after completing Atlantic's enhanced bias training program, Stacy had become a facilitator for similar training at other airlines, sharing her experience as a teachable moment for industry professionals. Jasmine was still processing this unexpected development when a familiar figure stopped beside her seat, Tyler Jennings, impeccably dressed as always, this time in a charcoal suit with a subtle purple tie. Ms. Washington, he greeted her with a warm smile. I thought that might be you. Chicago for the Technology Center opening? Tyler, she returned the smile, genuinely pleased to see him. Yes, the ceremony is tomorrow. Are you heading there as well? I am indeed. Continental is announcing a $25 million investment in similar centers in 5 additional cities. Your model was too compelling not to replicate. After the flight attendants completed the beverage service, Tyler moved to the empty seat beside Jasmine at her invitation. Their conversation flowed easily as they discussed the remarkable changes of the past 3 months. What had begun as an awkward encounter across a first-class aisle had evolved into a productive partnership that was reshaping corporate America's approach to inclusion. The most surprising outcome, Tyler confided, has been how these initiatives are affecting the bottom line. Companies with high accountability index scores are outperforming their peers by an average of 12%. It turns out that treating people with equal dignity isn't just ethically right, it's good business. It always was, Jasmine replied. We just needed the data to prove it to those who weren't motivated by ethics alone. As they discussed future collaborations, Jasmine was struck by how organically this movement had grown from a single moment of refusing to accept injustice. The incident that could have been merely a personal humiliation had instead become a catalyst for systemic change because she had been positioned to demand accountability rather than merely endure mistreatment. When they landed in Chicago, Jasmine was met by a welcoming committee that included the mayor, community leaders, and a group of excited students from the technology center's first cohort. As cameras flashed and reporters called questions, Jasmine spotted a young girl at the edge of the group, watching with intense focus. Breaking away from the official reception, Jasmine approached the girl, who couldn't have been more than 12 years old. Hello, Jasmine smiled. Are you part of our first student group? The girl nodded, wide-eyed. Yes, ma'am. I'm Destiny Williams. I want to build security systems like you do. Well, Destiny, Jasmine replied, I have a feeling you're going to go even further than I have. And when you do, remember that success isn't just about what you achieve for yourself, it's about the doors you open for others along the way. The next day, standing at the podium before the gleaming new technology center, Jasmine looked out at the assembled crowd. Students and their families sat alongside corporate executives, community leaders, and media representatives. In the front row, she spotted Tyler Jennings, Regina Taylor, and, surprisingly, a quietly attentive Stacy Miller. 3 months ago, Jasmine began, a moment of humiliation could have been just that, a painful experience to be endured and forgotten. Instead, it became the catalyst for transformation, not because of what happened to me, but because of how we all chose to respond. She outlined the journey from that first confrontation to today's celebration, emphasizing that the technology center represented the true purpose behind all her efforts, creating opportunities for those who had been systematically excluded. True victory isn't measured in corporate policies changed or accountability systems implemented, she continued. It's measured in lives transformed, in barriers removed, in talent unleashed that might otherwise have been wasted. It's measured in the face of a young girl who now believes she can become a security engineer because she sees someone who looks like her doing it successfully. As she concluded her remarks and cut the ribbon to officially open the center, Jasmine felt a sense of completion. The circle that had begun with her own struggle for education and opportunity was now extending to a new generation, equipped with better tools and fewer barriers than she had faced. Later, as students demonstrated their coding projects for the assembled guests, Jasmine found herself standing beside Stacy Miller, both of them watching a young boy explain his cybersecurity algorithm with infectious enthusiasm. Thank you for coming today, Jasmine said quietly. I wasn't sure I would be welcome, Stacy admitted. But I wanted to see what all this was really about. It's about changing systems that allow good people to participate in harmful patterns without even recognizing it, Jasmine replied. It was never about punishing individuals. Stacy nodded thoughtfully. I've learned more in the past 3 months than in my entire 11 years at Atlantic. Painful lessons, but necessary ones. As the event concluded and guests began to depart, Destiny Williams approached Jasmine once more, this time carrying a hand-drawn card signed by all the students. We wanted to thank you, she said shyly. Not just for the center, but for showing us how to stand up for ourselves. Jasmine accepted the card with genuine emotion, recognizing that this, more than the corporate reforms, more than the successful merger, more than the public recognition, was the true victory. A generation of children who would grow up knowing their worth was non-negotiable and their potential was limitless. As she prepared to board her flight back to Atlanta that evening, Jasmine paused at the gate, remembering how differently she had felt standing in this same position 3 months earlier. The battle hadn't been easy, and it certainly wasn't over. But today had provided irrefutable evidence that it was worth fighting. Her phone buzzed with a message from her mother. "Your father would be so proud today. You didn't just climb the mountain, you built an elevator for others to follow." Boarding the plane, Jasmine was greeted by a flight attendant who treated her with the same professional courtesy extended to every other passenger, no more, no less. And in that simple normalcy lay perhaps the greatest victory of all. What do you think? Was Jasmine right to transform her moment of humiliation into a movement for change? Has someone in your life stood up against discrimination in a way that inspired you? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell if you want to hear more stories about people turning adversity into opportunity. Your support helps us continue sharing these powerful narratives that remind us all of our ability to create positive change. Jasmine Washington's story teaches us that true change requires both courage and strategic action. While many face discrimination daily, those with power have a unique responsibility to challenge injustice rather than simply endure it. Her refusal to accept humiliation transformed an isolated incident into industry-wide reform. The story demonstrates that systemic change comes not from performative gestures but from concrete accountability measures backed by data. By creating the Accountability Index and forming a coalition of influential allies, Jasmine established lasting mechanisms for progress rather than settling for temporary solutions. We also learn that redemption is possible through genuine acknowledgement and commitment to improvement. From Stacy's transformation into a bias training facilitator to Tyler's corporate investment in diversity initiatives, former participants in discrimination became partners in dismantling it. Perhaps most importantly, the story reminds us that victory isn't measured solely in corporate policies changed, but in opportunities created for future generations. Jasmine's Technology Center represents the ultimate purpose of the fight, ensuring that talent isn't wasted because of prejudice. What moments in your life have you witnessed discrimination and wished you had spoken up? Have you ever used your position, however large or small, to stand against injustice? Share your experiences in the comments below, and if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear this message today. Together, we can transform individual acts of courage into collective progress. Thank you for listening, and remember, dignity is never negotiable.